absolutely phenomenal. Over here, I don't believe they'll look past their head. 80 cm's a big fish. I've got 80 cm fish swimming around at Coil Sale. I've got access to the Sakai auction. The top end didn't seem to have any limits. Thousands and thousands of pounds for every single individual piece. You've let the cat out of the bag now, mate, haven't you?
We might have to cut this bit out then. Well, welcome back, everyone. Chris Wall here with Ricky Stoddart from Koi Talk. This is the first podcast in a little while. We should probably fill everyone in on what's been going on the last 12 months, Rick.
I think little while's probably an understatement. I think it's been a year, hasn't it?
It's been that long. Wow.
Yeah, my fault. Hold my hands up.
Well, that's very gracious of you, mate.
Yeah. So my pursuit of perfection in everything I do, I was happy with what we were doing. Don't get me wrong, I love doing this, but it was the sort of visuals around it, the sound, the video stuff. It weren't cutting it for me. So decided to transplant it to a new place.
Yeah.
I thought of building it all out a little bit, and kind of did that, and forgot it existed for a year.
Yeah, sure, as you do.
Pain in the arse, but
And then back to the original.
so moved it
studio.
back to the original one, yeah. And
sure.
we're here now. If you actually saw what was going on behind the scenes with this, it's a hell of a setup going on now.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're back on track. Obviously, there's been a lot of demand for the content in the WhatsApp groups and whatnot. It's just another form of content that we could put out there. It is difficult, when you're doing live stuff, to get everything across. I think we're fairly experienced at doing it, but sometimes there is the odd thing that you sort of retrospectively go, I should have mentioned that. When you're doing text work, it's hard to expand on every entity and to have that interactive sort of nature to it. So I think the podcasts are good content for people, and obviously we wouldn't have done it again if there weren't a demand for it.
No, so here we are.
Here we are, mate. Yeah, so we've done that bit. Let's move on to the koi side. So what's going on in the koi world, mate?
I think we should probably obviously just mention about the changes to the mag first
sure.
and foremost, because obviously that's been a huge part of all this. But yeah, I think from my side, I've spoke about this on my Q&A live show that we did when I announced it at the time. And yeah, I think it's fair to say for me, I kind of lost enthusiasm a little bit with the magazine, which you probably might have noticed. I think it's fair, if you'd not carried a lot of the slack at times, we wouldn't have been able to put them out there. But there's just certain things in the way I function and the way I am, that when things rub up against them, it affects that kind of passion, which is my drive in everything I do. And unfortunately, obviously, we had to look at a direction with the magazine where it had to become more commercialized in order to really sustain and survive as its own entity, which is what we wanted for the long term. But I think it's fair to say, and that's what I tasked you with, and you did a cracking job of, but ultimately you have to do things at that point which might not sit well with a vision of a magazine, a kind of impartial magazine that represents what we do and who we are.
I think there were necessary evils in place to, keep viability of it, but it went against the grain of kind of what the brand stood for, which was impartial, experienced advice, with no strings attached, really.
If we're being open about it, I think initially we was on the same page with the concept, we've had battles throughout, haven't we, Chris? Let's face it. I've sat and said, this needs to become more sustainable, because, I did have to bankroll it for a long time. And then at that, we start looking at little things where it's like, well, let's, change the paper stock. The amount of time I spent getting all that stuff where I just don't want to make compromises, the looks and feels. So that's understandable. And then, wanting to use the best pictures on the appreciation pages, all these things cost money. People, reading the magazine might not realize, but, we have to buy every one of those pictures, and they come at a cost. And then, crazy things that I never really anticipated is that people were starting to, and do trust the magazine as a voice. And then that also, we kind of hit a couple of points where, with certain adverts and brands, all of a sudden we got associated with backlash from that because, it was almost as if we were then recommending these brands.
Yeah, almost vouching for.
Yeah, and at that point, it's a commercial decision. We've got to, the magazine's got to keep going. But ultimately, yeah, some of these things I might not necessarily align with.
Well, I think the reality kind of hit home a bit, but 2 years deep into the project, you're pot committed at that stage. So, we are where we're at with it. We had some great feedback from everyone, sort of saying how much they love the magazine and how much they're going to miss it. But I think there's still plenty of content to be had, to be created, and maybe watch this space moving forward.
No wavering from our side. I love seeing it produced. Hence, I got the redesign done, which I think was a nice refresh, just to start making the content even more appealing, because that's why I always wanted to keep it print only. I think that experience is so valuable to have. But I think the biggest thing that's weighed the heaviest is the production of it on a monthly subscription.
Yeah.
The people, the mental strain and energy that puts on to do it ultimately then leads to more compromise, because we're having to farm content at a huge rate. Even other silly little things like, we've always looked at we've had a belief that we needed to bring in external contributors. And even then we're doing it, and there's things in content that don't necessarily align with our thought process. Yeah, sure. And I've just become aware that, ultimately people buying the magazine have been buying into me and you, our styles of koi keeping and our voice and the trust in that. And I really want to protect that moving forward, which will ultimately mean just closing it all down in respect of who comes into it, what comes into it, from an advertising perspective, reining all that back in. So, and then changing the production run. It says so. The subscription has now stopped, but we're just going to be producing them. I think we're going to aim for once every couple of months, aren't we?
Yeah,
as a target, and then make sure that we are absolutely in love with every edition that we sign off. From a content aesthetic perspective and everything, no compromises, even down to the delivery service.
That was a frustrating aspect. It's a bit of a steep learning curve when you sort of, decide to start producing a magazine on top of the day job sort of thing. Aspects of other commercial areas letting us down, postage, printing, then posting to us so that we can get it post back. Yeah. It's just,
let's face it, because of the amount of magazines and subscribers that we had, doing it in-house didn't really seem viable. So obviously you found a service that we thought was ideal. It certainly got us the cost down, which has been great. However, the lead times and the unreliable nature of them dropping all at different times. I get how frustrating it is for people, because all of a sudden, so that people are seeing they've got a magazine, others haven't got it. We have no control at the point of sending the magazine from print to the distribution company. Yet every back issue that we handle in-house goes incredibly well, because it's packaged by us, it's dispatched using a slightly more premium service with Royal Mail when they get there. So, even these changes, we're going to be bringing all that in-house. Will be a fair bit of work, but we're willing to do it just to ensure the quality of service end-to-end is what we expect it to be. And that, for me, is what will keep that energy and enthusiasm there to keep doing it.
And obviously, the podcast side of things, I think it's both quite therapeutic for us to just, we talk about koi every day, we rant, we rave, but to actually get down on camera and sort of thrash it out over a table and, give everyone a sense of what actually goes on in this industry, because, my God, there's a lot more to it than just having some fish in a pond.
Good bit of therapy this for me as well, mate. We can get all my addiction problems out there and all the rest of it for everyone to enjoy, make everybody else feel a little bit more normal.
So it wouldn't be much of a podcast about koi if we didn't talk about koi at some stage, Rick. So seems the most likely place to start is All Japan Koi Show. That's not long been. We spoke off air a minute ago, and we were talking about the GC Sakai Kahaku. You sort of pointed out something that I didn't spot, I must admit, and I've subsequently gone and looked at the picture, and marginal, but yeah. Go on.
You've looked, have you?
I've looked, yeah, because I was, A, slightly annoyed if it was obvious and I hadn't seen it, and B, whether it was just you were winding me up. But yeah, go on.
You've looked at a non-edited, polished picture, like one shot on
Not
the phone.
fully edited. So basically, just to clarify, Ricky sort of has had a look at some images that were perhaps not in the public domain. Is that fair to say?
No, just like somebody
Obvious,
snapped
like,
it on a phone.
Yeah.
No touching up, no anything.
Yeah. And there is indeed a slight offness to the head.
The head's off. Absolutely no doubt. The head's off.
But given that, at 96, 97, I think, something like that, absolutely biblical size, still given the crown of greatest koi on the planet.
This is now, I say this, and I hear people when they discover the flaw in an All Japan Grand Champion feel so excited that they've managed to spot the problem. This is not that. It's there. This is understanding more what you can take from this in how the Japanese are seeing fish these days and what's going on, because they don't care. That's basically where we're at. The overriding, whatever's gone off, there's a few ways you'll look at this. The main one being there is you're comparing it against what else is around it. So, and it's looking at all the positives first. That's where we're at. And I think it was head and shoulders in its complete package above anything else. Its body level was just extreme. Its Benny, its pattern, absolutely phenomenal. Over here, I don't believe they'll look past the head. Outside of Japan, not a chance. But I just see this so much now, where I'll be looking at fish and go, that's not right, and they kind of look at you like you've got three heads. You're talking fish that are tens of thousands of pounds, be it Nisai, Sanzai, whatever it is, and you mention something like head looks a bit off, no problem. Really? But it might be no problem for the koi show. That aside, it is a problem, especially when you've got some guy stood next to me. You're expecting him to pay hand over a sack full of cash, and it's off. I mean, these things might stay marginally off, but in young fish, they might really develop at 3-4-year-old as a massive, massive problem. But coming back to the original point, yeah, I mean, fish head and shoulders above did seem to be off to me. But there we go. That's Japan. That's showing you it's the best koi in the world, and clearly that's stuff head and shoulders above. But that insight for me is important, just so you can get your head around how they are looking at fish. Positives first, all the way.
Can you see why UK probably hobbyists around the world, more so in Europe, but certainly the UK will get frustrated in that sense then?
I'm confused. When it comes to UK shows, I can't even begin to process that. It's not really looking at koi. I think this is the biggest bit, right? Koi in Japan is seen from an artistic standpoint, and that's where there is. You can't remember which issue of the magazine it was when I did the interview with Takano. You know, he started without prompt talking about judging and this fourth felt sense. Yeah, and these, when we're talking All Japan level fit shows, these are primarily judged by breeders and professionals. So at that point, what you're getting is people who have been exposed to so many fish. So many fish, and the quality level is so high. If you strip it down in regards to pattern, body and skin, you could look around and every fish could win at that point. So then what does differentiate these fish? And it's this fourth felt sense of, wow, it's that one.
That impression that you can't quantify, but the eye sees it.
Exactly. And it is with koi. When you're passionate about koi and you've got some experience, that is a wow, look at that. And that's a lot of fish at All Japan, but like this Kohaku that won, that to me, even seeing it in the first video I saw it, it was like, whoa.
The impression of the fish. I mean, the thing is, at that sort of, when you see meter-sized fish, it is just a, wow, that's insane kind of moment. So to have qualities skin, the fuckerin, everything about it, just that body mass, that body line, the head the size of like a dustbin lid. It was just, it is insane.
That's actually, the real point there as well. The size that what was sat here on this side of the world, not there in the flesh, you miss completely. Is 80 cm's a big fish. I've got 80 cm fish swimming around at Coil Sale. You stick one in there, and let's face it, what's 20 cm? You actually, kind of look at it from a perspective, it's nothing in regards to actual length. When you actually see that extra 20 cm on a koi, it's just night and day, because the increase in mass, that's even starting from young fish, just the increase in mass you see through the different sizes, a 20 cm versus a 30 cm tosai, completely different mass level. So yeah, 80 to 90, then 90 to a meter is just staggering.
Yeah, it's
that
biblical.
bit you don't see, and when you are just looking from outside in, you are going to miss that element, which will have a huge impact on which fish actually wins.
Yeah, sure. So, spoken about the Sakai Kahaku, previous year's runner-up. So, nice to see that the fish has progressed, and I kind of like that. If at first you don't succeed,
Yeah,
not that Kentaro needs any reassurance on that.
I think that one was actually raised by Narita,
Right. Okay.
if I remember right, which is, the Sakai dominance at the show once again was ridiculous across them big size classes. But that fish was raised by Narita himself.
Yeah, I think he posted something just short of 600 fish went to the show.
The guy's insane.
Yeah, but yeah, that's
My hero.
Someone you aspire to. But yeah, one of the fish that probably, there's always a bit of a story, isn't there? Always a bit of a sort of controversy, could you say, when it got brought up in one of the groups that we're involved in, and that was the runner-up, the Sakai Sankey. So for those of you that haven't seen it, yeah, it's a very wide fish behind the head.
Sankey Saba.
And, and it caused, obviously, I think everyone could probably appreciate the quality in a sense of, the size, the pattern, the skin, everything. But the silhouette, the body line of the fish, it really wasn't to a lot of people's taste.
Wasn't to mine. I've always struggled with, the first time I encountered this body type was at Issa. That fish was very similar to the body type that made Issa famous, kind of put him on the map. These overly huge shouldered showers, almost sometimes short bodied looking as well. They were just ridiculous. And he has kind of since eased that out of them now, even though you do get one every now and again. But yeah, the Sankey, I've got to say, it ruined the elegance a bit for me. The overall quality, wow. Again, but it's just, again, I heard so many times the head, small head. That fish didn't have a small head. The head was huge. It's just that the shoulders directly behind it were so wide. It did, in my opinion, first glances, that's ill. When they start swelling kind of like that in that area, but it wasn't. It was just this sheer massive power. I've actually got a Taniguchi Sankey that's just turned up. It's so similar in its body, and I'm not going to lie, I struggle with it, but this is not a thing here of this is right or wrong or good or bad. It's a matter of preference. I think that's the important bit to understand at this point. You haven't got to like it, but you should appreciate its qualities, what it's taken to get something to that size, to create that mass, create that skin condition, everything where it's at. That's the bit I see and go, bravo, but it's not for me. And I think that language around that's important a lot of the time, because you'll hear such sort of negative, derogatory words around something like that when it's just not to someone's preference. And it's important to understand what's going on here.
I think when it comes down to the standards as such, people could be quite critical. For me, at that size, I've not got a problem. Yes, would it improve the fish? Yeah, but I don't think you can look at koi like that by saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if this was a bit better or this was a bit better?" This is not how it works. But yeah, Sakai dominance was in full play, and needless to say, it sort of leads on to our next point of what you've been buying recently, mate.
That's a bit of a question to ask me, isn't it, mate?
Well, what have you been
Jesus,
buying?
eh? Like asking me to look up my skirt. Or
No,
your
you're
skirt.
right, mate. Yeah, yeah. Just point that out that I'm wearing trousers and pants today.
Yeah, well, as per, I've stayed away from it for so long, the Sakai auction thing. Obviously, everybody full know, wow, the Dainichi project that I explored. Last year, dipped my toe in with Sakai for the first time and getting a couple of batches of Tosai. One in particular that was an incredibly special batch. Huge investment for me, but I'm honestly now at the point where I'm seeing the results properly. I've got Nisai that I've raised from that batch that were 12 to 15 cm up to 55 cm, possibly beyond now. I'm blown away. The amount of quality fish that's come from that batch of fish was just staggering. And bearing in mind, that's an early doors kind of throwaway batch of Sakai fish. The quality they produce is vast, obviously, and that's important to understand the context here. And yeah, from a relative perspective at Sakai, the lowest grade. At that point, what I bought, compare that to other breeders, you're probably getting into the crux of some farms
That's a good.
close to their higher level, but certainly, a really good level at a lot of farms. So that just gives it some context around it. But I mean, you've seen them. There's some of those fish are spectacular and are going to go on to produce 80 plus centimetre fish, as I'm clearly fathoming out how to get the most out of the ponds.
Yeah.
How
How many are you going to have is the question, mate.
Yeah, I can never have too many of them, mate.
True,
ever.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think it was inevitable that, just like with Dainichi, dipped my toe in properly and got access to the Sakai auction.
Dangerous.
I kind of wish I didn't. I am excited, though, but it's been wild. The past two.
So just to give sort of people some context, this is probably something more not focused in the UK market, the Sakai auctions.
Yeah.
I know people dip their toes, the odd fish, blah, 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 but this is sort of on a different scale in terms of the amount of fish that you've gone in for at a small size.
Yeah.
High risk, let's be honest.
You see, I don't see that. You might be sat, but given...
High risk in a sense that it's a lot of money to outlay
Oh, yeah.
comparatively to
Always.
what you could achieve.
Got to do it, though. Yeah, mate. I mean, for me, I'm at the point where I don't make decisions. I think, this rational business decisions at times, it's all driven by passion and what I want to do as a koi person.
Yeah.
And having access to that kind of quality of stuff, given the level that I bought, what they're putting in the auction is the highest level they will have available from a selection at any point, bar their tatigoi. Now, this I can absolutely assure you, these auction lots, the fish in there are better than, I would say, 80% of Gosanki breeders in Niigata's tatigoi. There's no marketing spiel there. I've seen these fish over years and years. I know exactly what I'm buying. It's not even just looking at the fish in front of me and assessing that quality in comparison. When you then consider the genetics behind them as well, that's when you just think, wow, that's just bonkers. And they've got so many of them. But it's understandable, they're producing from so many parent sets. This place is on another level. So to me, it kind of made sense because I would be wrestling with a breeder in Niigata to try and buy a handful of these fish, and here they are available to buy en masse, really. There was loads. Bowls of 10, bowls of 5, then the individual pieces.
Some of the individual pieces started to grow arms and legs, though.
Well, even the batches. So I was curious to see how it would compare against Dainichi for a start. And this is the biggest koi farm in the world. The competition there is just insane. And, I'm not going to lie, I got logged in on day one of them ending and thought, last 10 minutes, I was like, oh my God, there's no bids. I was scrolling down, there was just the odd one with bids on, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'm like, oh God. So starts bidding, and then sure enough, it just dropped inside them last 10 minutes, and the whole world came alive, and it was savage. So there's anti-sniping on most of the Japanese auctions. So if you bid within the last 5 minutes, it adds 5 minutes on.
Yeah.
And the Asian culture seems to be to let it run down to 30 seconds and then add a bid on.
another 5,
You can imagine the tedium. So yeah, anyway, I got into it. I always, when I'm in the auctions, I make a point of, I do all my research before I study every lot. I make a short list, and then when I'm actually in the auction, I only watch my short list. I ignore everything else, so I don't make any silly impulse buys and focus all the attention on the lots that I want.
Wasn't much of a short list though, was it?
It was a long short list.
Yeah, long.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with fun, like obviously Sakai, world renowned, arguably number one koi farm on the planet. But one of the lots that you sort of really got deep into was the Chagoy, mango Chagoy.
You've let the cat out of the bag now, mate, haven't you? Nobody knew I had them. Apart from you.
Yeah,
That's the last time I tell you anything now.
Oh, we might have to cut this bit out then.
No, I mean, the thing in general was bonkers, right? So, I mean, bearing in mind the average lot size of the fish was from 12 to 14 cm. A few breached over it, but that was probably the average. These fish just don't make sense. I can see why a lot of European dealers and thinking haven't done it, because the price per fish is bonkers.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at them differently, because I'm looking at, I've got this history, this research, this data behind me now of what these fish do and how they deliver, which gives me the confidence in what I'm looking at, knowing that there wasn't probably a single fish from that batch of 1,050 as good as the worst fish in these batches I bought this time, if that made sense.
Yeah.
So I've got that, and I'm not looking at them as a 12 cm fish that would be imported, quarantined, and then put in a sales pond and probably stay that way. I'm looking at these fish as Nisai, and that's where the confidence sort of comes from, and the ability to know I can take those fish through and deliver on the potential that they've got. So yeah, I'm watching these lots, and honestly, it was just staggering, and it was so consistent, the price of every batch of fish, to a point now where I know if I'm going to engage, I know the minimum it's likely to go for, and the top end didn't seem to have any limits, and that's before it got to the individual fish. I mean, my God. And every lot, generally Sakai, Kohaku and Sankey, 90% of their production, they were just going mental. And then you get to the individual stuff, and in this particular first one, there was all Japan entry fish in there. I think the dearest lot went for about 15 grand or something like that, about 12 cm. But the amount of them kind of values that I was watching, every fish, thousands and thousands of pounds for every single individual piece. It's mad. And that's the ending price on the auction without any commissions or anything like that else added on. Madness. And that was the first one. So got a good haul, and then it got to the second one. And at this point, they decided to throw in some of the non-Go Sankey production and made it very aware to everybody that other than Benigoi, this would be the last of the mango line fish, the famous Karashi mango line, or super mango, which was just what everybody needed to get them stirred up.
Wets the whistle, mate, doesn't it?
Yeah, even to the point, I don't think I got any, did I, in the end? The white mangoes, which basically just look like a Shiro Muji. However, when you reframe it, they're a white Karashigoi from that serious genetic pool.
Yeah.
I couldn't get near them. Because in the end...
It's nuts, isn't it? Because if I were to sort of set up shop and try and sell a load of Shiro Muji, it's just not happening.
No. And they're the one, I think you were with me at the time, and I questioned it several times. And even after you said, no, you're mad, I still went a little bit higher.
I don't doubt that, mate. Yeah. I don't know why you bother asking.
And I still didn't get them.
No.
It was crazy. So, I mean, yeah, just wow. I'm glad I've done it, and I think, thus far I've released a small amount, and people seem dead keen for it, because I can't remember in my 20 odd years of doing this, people having
access to them,
and having them in the UK for people to have a go at, which I'm able to offer the growing with them, which I think also then gives people the confidence, because I'm not sure many koi keepers would want to be 12, 14 cm. What they're going to do with it.
Yeah, doing it justice, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's one thing, buying a fish with potential,
yeah.
but sort of realising that potential is something different. So yeah, going to be an exciting year for a lot of customers, and they went down. I'm always, you know what I'm like. I'm sort of glass half empty kind of guy, which makes uh, things interesting sometimes. But they were really well received.
Yeah. I think it's the same as my barometer, and you take this as you wish, has always been I feel like if I'm excited by something, that will filter down. Because even at this point, it's that buzz that I get. I'm feeling if that, with the amount of stuff I've seen, experienced, done, when that gets jolted, I feel like that's going to be received well. And yeah, I think it was because I know it's a rare opportunity. I've not seen them in the marketplace. So you might get the odd batch every now and again, but these are serious caliber of fish. And I do know from experience, Sakai Nisai, if you're going shopping there, you need thousands of pounds
Yeah.
at the lowest end. That is an absolute given. So to be able to get something that then people can also get access to it, I'm not saying they're cheap, but they're in the realms of far more people than thousands of pounds per fish. I love it. I love being able to share that opportunity with people and let them have a piece of this stuff that we're generally just having to sit watching, which is no fun.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to for these landing in the UK, and like you say, fair play to people that have had the sort of vision to go, well, I'll leave them in your trusted hands. That's quite a compliment in itself, you know what I mean? Because, like you say, what are you going to do with 12, 14 cm tosai? Stick them in the pond, and these are going to be purposely raised in an environment that, yeah, they're going to be some happy customers, I think, at the end of the day. So
I hope so.
yeah. So I mean, every year we kind of try and look beyond the curve a little bit and go, what's going to be popular, sort of thing. I've given up a little bit because, yeah, what if I say something's going to be popular, then generally speaking, it's not. So I sort of put the dampeners on it. So, but I remember a couple of years ago, we were saying the other day, Harawaki, they were like, you couldn't get enough of them. Following year, Goshki, couldn't get enough of them. Where do you see sort of taste going in the next year or so? Weird and Wonderful, or do you think Go Sankey is making a comeback?
The weird and wonderful thing is dying back. Definitely. I say dying back. It's going through stages. There is less of it being done. Other breeders are exploring stuff, but I think, Go Sankey seems to be coming back strong. Why? I don't know. Is there because of access? All of a sudden, more people progressing through the hobby, because it does seem to be the sort of journey, the phases that, weird and wonderful initially, no Go Sankey, then as they progress in the hobby, Go Sankey becomes more prevalent and tends to be the stay-in block. And then you get the other varieties sort of, just used in small amounts to build up a collection. But yeah, I can't think of too much super interesting that's kind of going on. I think the Aragoke thing is at a point where it's kind of peaking, possibly. Goshki's always been there. That for me, I don't think ever goes away. There's certain varieties where the issues with them is people's understanding and expectations, and we've seen it time and time again with Goshki. They don't seem to sell until they are jet black on the background and the Benny's popping. So at their kind of peak in a lot of ways, which is difficult with that variety because they need time. Most of them get there, but people don't give them the time. When they do get there and they look mint, they're super expensive. So there's all these things swooshing around. Yeah, Shiro's kind of there. I think the interesting thing is it's not even just about varieties these days. I think people are becoming more aware of lineage and how that can add a level of interest to your hobby that you might not have had before. Because when you're building a collection, and this is sort of where I'm at with it, it's what am I looking at? It's not like, oh, I fancy this variety this year. That is sometimes, don't get me wrong, but it's I fancy that variety because of that characteristic or that element of that lineage interests me. I'd like to do something with that. So like with Sakai, it's not only that quality, that's that size potential and that body type. It's like, I want
a piece of that, yeah.
I go. This year, Asagi's on my mind. It's not because
it's never not on your mind, is it? So it's sort of like a running joke with up at the farm that if Rick had a choice, he'd just stock Asagi. But yeah,
awesome. But it's like, I want to do Otsuka Asagi. So if I can't do that, I'm probably not going to do it. And that's going to be a tricky one because of the characteristic and the face characteristic shape of them. They're just stunning. So Shirotsuri, again, I mean, how many more times? There's so many Shirotsuri lineages out there. But for me right now, I've seen a huge kind of the demand for NND DK line Shiros seems to be higher than Omasako even. Possibly because scarcity there. NND DKs are quite hard to get hold of. There's not big numbers. Whereas Omasako does seem to be quite readily available now, and a lot of people have them. So you've got all these different plays, and the NNDDK do develop a bit of a different body kind of type, a little bit different in the skin as well. So that's when I think when you start looking at koi like that, it does really broaden the horizon for you because there's so many different things you can start looking at. Chagoi, one of the plainest varieties, but all of a sudden, well, I've managed to get hold of some Marido Chags. First time I've actually had Marido because so hard to get as Tosai when we want them. Even the Nisai don't often let them go because Marido really controls the spawnings because otherwise they end up swamped with them. So sometimes they don't even release any Nisai. They wait till the Sansai. So to get all the Tosai is phenomenal. And I can't wait to see how they grow compared to Marasei.
Yeah, sure.
Marasei Chags have even changed. Not had a chance to ask about it yet, but I can see it. I've had Marasei Chags for years, and I never liked the fact of the head always seemed too small on them. That's changed. They've got this huge, long, almost Otsuka Asagi-like head and mouth on them now. Fantastic. So it'd be nice to see how Maridos compare against that now, and then moving forward, that might be a complete change, or who knows. That's for me what makes koi keeping interesting, and I think a lot of the trends are sort of dictated that way. Let's face it, with Karashigoi, we've seen it. There's so many Karashigoi around, but what's made Karashigoi interesting, or Ginrin Karashigoi interesting? The Dainichi Yellow Monkey.
Yeah.
It's then the lineage behind them and what they can do that's made that interesting and made them popular. Typical thing, obviously popularity of them soared, and now supply seems to have been squashed, which is also upsetting me.
Yeah, ain't that always the way, mate? But too much of a good thing, mate, as they say.
No.
Yeah, too much yellow.
So yeah, trends, mate. But I do think generally, yeah, like you say, Harawaki, I think that one's been and gone. Like I said, there was a time where you could have just, if you could have printed them, you'd have just kept selling them. It was ridiculous.
Isn't it bizarre, Al? Well, I guess it's like anything, isn't it? Things go in cycles. But yeah, I remember back in the day, just could not get enough of them.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
I think possibly as appreciation grows as well, because I think there'll always be a place for the Nongo Sankey stuff in the wider market. But as appreciation grows, a lot of that, I think the quirky stuff becomes less appealing because the refined, real quality pieces become less and less. And then the problem there is the price of that stuff skyrockets. A lot of it, if you're just into it because it's metallic and shiny, there's loads of that about. Let's take Aoki for example. Aoki's main pond is just a masterclass. If you actually put it in perspective, there's probably anywhere between 50 and 100 fish in there, up to 4 or 5 years old. So you just do some quick maths there and think how many fish actually make it to that pond every year. So Aoki's got all this stuff that gets cast off, nice, bright, shiny, quirky, wonderful, all the rest of it. But if you then your eye refines and you're looking for those refined pieces of those varieties, different world then. Really different world from a price perspective. And that's possibly what puts people off. And then there's always them elements of risks and unknown with the Nongo Sankey stuff. It's very, very hard to predict what's going to happen with the Kikisui. There's no real, like with the Kohaku, you've got Sashi, which can help us indicate what the Benny's going to do. You ain't got that with a Kikisui. There's so many elements you've got to kind of get right in it as well. So if you're in the realms then where we're talking about fish that maybe 2, 3, 4,000 pound a piece, Go Sankey seems like a really nice, safe bet compared to that wild Kikisui that could throw a shimmy at any point or whatever it is. Tough one. We'll see.
Yeah, so watch this space then, I guess. Obviously at the farm, busy. You've had quite a few alterations. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, the old man's job list is just, yeah, it's like a revolving one at the minute, to be fair. As quick as one thing drops off, two jump on.
So I think that just to give some people some perspective at home, one of the issues in this industry, generally speaking, when you bring fish in, is heating the fish. You know, especially young koi, they will not thank you for going into cold water. So one of the big sort of projects you've had recently is to try and get more heat around the farm,
Yeah.
and that is going to change things. How much for you?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it's been a big issue because there's the amount of raising that I'm doing. I mean, right now, what were ponds I used to use for bringing in Tosai, I've currently got, I think, 4 or 5 of those ponds with Nisai or older in that are still growing and being raised. So that's really having an impact. And I've got over 20 ponds outside that have had no heating, so basically useless for me for 6 months of the year. And I was having some issues with the boiler. It's an oil boiler, and we believe it's short cycling and kind of coking up's been a big problem. So I got the guys in to kind of look at a longer term solution for that. And during that conversation, he's like, that boiler could run this whole site. I kind of looked and said, nah, I think you're full of shit. But then he's like, no, honestly, I says, well, I want a bit of data to kind of back it up. And then I said, if that's the case, there's an area with 12 ponds out. I said, I'd love to get them heated. And sure enough, it all came back and checked out. So, yeah, I had the heating engineers in, and I've now got 12 of those ponds cooking up, working an absolute dream. The boiler doesn't seem to have really broke any more of a sweat, which is quite cool. Made some other alterations, got a big water buffer vessel in now and a few other bits. So, yeah, amazing. But then that's just kind of sparked it up because it's like, it's uncovered out there at the minute, so we're going to look to upgrade the building, get some steel sheeting around that. But then there's another row of 11 ponds out there straight away. I'm just staring at now, and I said they need to be on heat by the middle of this year. So I think as soon as that bit's done, we're going to get on with slapping a building over them and then get them warmed up as well. And then August we get to building the new fish houses, all scheduled in.
Yeah, so you've got a fairly big list of infrastructure to sort out this year, all part of the bigger picture sort of thing. But I mean, how frustrating was it at times of the year when you've got to sort of give up space for fish that you really want to keep pushing on?
It kills me.
Yeah,
It really, really gets me because it's not just a thing. They need space. I've been tinkering around more and more, as you've seen now, because I know what I'm capable of doing. I know what my regimes are capable of doing, but it's finding out how a pond needs to perform and what I can do with it to get where I need to get, basically. So you've probably seen this year the Nisai, getting Nisai. My whole benchmark in my head is based on what I've seen and all that experience there. So when I see a Nisai from a quality breeder, I expect it to be around 50 to 55 cm. I've lifted fish like that out the mud pond. I know the body volume level I expect, the skin shine, the pigmentation, everything. That is the imprint on the back of my brain that if I'm not achieving that, I'm not doing it good enough. And I feel like I've been getting there, I've been hitting quite easily. Bearing in mind I'm doing it with ponds that are 3,500 gallon versus half an acre in size is the bit you can't miss here. And even when breeders are using concrete ponds, they're generally, the blueprint for the big southern breeders is like a 40-foot by 10-foot pond, the huge. So I'm using a 3,500 gallon, 20-foot by 8-foot pond. And to keep it commercially viable as well, really trying to max out on the stocking levels. So
I had noticed that, yeah.
I've been comfortably pushing 40, 45 cm Nisai with ease, getting them up to 50. I think last year's Shinoda Heel saw is maxed out about 52 by the end of the growing season. So, and that's looking at over like a 6-month period. So kind of just stretching things out a bit because I can. And this is a methodology that a lot are starting to look at now. It's like, especially at Sakai, to be fair, it's like a growing season can be 12 months when we're doing it indoors. It doesn't have to be forced into 6 months, where at times you are literally force feeding because you're trying to max out every bit over that 6-month period. stretching it out and looking at it over the 12-month period, which makes a difference. But what that's allowed me to do is kind of do the initial 6-month growing season, achieve well, it was kind of 45 to 48 cm we were getting this year around that. And then at that point, do a final selection where I really understand the quality and the future of the fish at that point as well, with the confidence to drop the stocking level drastically, because that's all it's coming down to. To achieve this, I need to stock at this level, and life's great. And I sort of toyed with that. About October, we did the harvest, Dainichi Sakai fish, like I say, 45, 48-ish. Got one pond where I tried to keep it at 20, failed miserably. I think ended up with 30, 35 in there, if I remember exactly. Which is actually, I'm glad it happened now in that way, because as you've seen with those fish, it's delivered on it. They've had that extra few months with that low stocking level being pushed. I say pushed still, it's not been too aggressive compared with the summer stuff. And they're now 55 and the odd couple going beyond with vast body volume and still looking as good as they always do. So, yeah, amazing to be sort of tinkering around with that. But then, to answer the initial point, yeah, now I see if I want to raise that, how I've got to be stocking the ponds and what I've got to do. And it just points back to one thing. There's not enough of them to keep going. I'm having fun raising fish to 3 year. So we've got the Dainichi male pond. I say it's 90% Dainichi now. There's some other stuff. That's a collection of fish I don't want to let go. Raised from Tosai up to Sanzai. It is an absolutely phenomenal, dreamy pond of fish. And they're, I think, 67 cm, the biggest one. Male Sansai. And you just compute that. I harvested female Sansai NND out of the mud pond at 63, 65 cm. And the body volume don't actually look any different. So it's like, for me, I'm like, shit, well, I'm doing this. This is awesome. How far can I take them? Yeah, so I don't want to let that go. And then there's another pond where I've finally this year, we kind of call it my pond, as you know.
Oh, yeah. I know the one.
Where it's like, right, how far? Because I remember some snide comment a while back, actually, was about my raising. It's that I only ever raised fish to Nisai, like I was incapable of doing it beyond that, no commercial decisions. I was just incapable.
That's like a red rag to a bull, that is, with you. I'm surprised all of them aren't Sansai and Yonsai ponds now.
So sure, I brought some of my fish back from Japan, set apart. So fish going into here were a few big Nisai, and I brought some Yonsai back as well. So there was a bit of a mixture. And yeah, I mean, sure enough, I was actually looking at the big Sankey, the girl, earlier, because I was just curious. I'm looking to call it time and start winding things down a little bit on that pond before we sort of edge into next season. And I've been targeting 80 cm with that. And she hit 79 this morning.
But the body mass on that fish is absolutely vast.
So that's been the challenge again. It's like, right, I'm doing big fish. What does the stock? That pond's been overstocked all year. I just couldn't get the numbers of fish down because they were too good. But yeah, with that, I know there's a Sansai Karashigo, one of the Akau one I've raised in there that's at a minimum 70. We're not even talking a full 36 months old yet. Black Zeus in there at 70. There's other Dainichi Sansai I've raised since Tosai between 65 and 70. So yeah, I mean, even like that Sankey I just mentioned, I think she was 73 when she came. Yonsai, again, it's in line with the NND, that particular Sankey being from NND, with their mud pond raising at that point. I will get that fish. That fish will at 80 cm before I call it time, and then it's just going beyond. So yeah, it's nice. But again, if I want to continue that, you need space.
Yeah.
Because to really push it, the next level would be interesting, going above 80. That's going to take, there don't want to be many fish in that pond really to do it. And I say do it and get the volume as well. Like, that's the real obsessive important part for me.
100%. That is, I mean, we've spoken about it quite a few times. It's a little bit sort of throwaway comment for some people, but for me, it's really evident that the difference between a 60 cm fish with a body and no body is just night and day. It's an unbelievable difference. Almost to the point where it's not the same product.
No, It's everything. Even body mass, even at the lowest level of just the difference between one that's, I would say, nourished and malnourished. You've actually somehow inadvertently started something here because it's just popped into my head about the amount of just looking around recently. I went through a phase of stuff being sent to me from one particular dealer's website, and I mean the guy needed shopping to RSPCA, to be fair, because had that been a dog with that level of malnourishment, somebody would have reported him for sure. That's shocking, but just the difference between it being the correct body weight, a standard sort of normal, yeah, that's acceptable. The amount out there that are falling below that, from what I'm seeing, is just bizarre. Really bizarre, but it makes a huge difference because we are talking at the point of it being undernourished. And when that happens, as with humans and anything, you don't look your best. It affects skin, it affects shine in their case, because obviously it's affecting mucus. Just the whole lot goes off it. Colour, the colour can't look its best if it's not nourished properly.
Not to mention the health side of things.
Yeah.
Moving fish that are underweight is not
No.
not the one, is it?
No. When I'm talking about body, the thing in it's beyond that basic nourishment and to the point of championship level, that's where I'm seeing it. But yeah, that basic level, I think it's probably one to delve into a bit more because you're getting a bit exhausted of seeing it. No, went off on one a bit there, but
yeah, no, it's we'll probably elaborate on that in a future issue. But going back to sort of your plans for this year, obviously I know it's hard to sort of reinvent the wheel in this industry. There's a bit of innovation going on, but one of the things that sort of pricked my ears, you were talking to Ryuki about some lighting.
You let another one out of the bag now.
You let that one out of the bag the other day.
No, you're right, mate. I think this is a huge, huge one because this winter again, all my learning generally comes from first-hand experience of I see something, I know something's not right, off, and then analyze everything around it and try and figure out what it is. Now, last year, it was my Dainichi pond, to be fair, that I noticed first. Having the pigment looked absolutely insane all year, gets to winter, and I start seeing the Benny pigment actually retracting as if the fish is being kept in the dark. They're still in them same ponds they've been in all summer, and it's retracting back into the scale, really, really lightening up and softening up. I was like, wow. I started thinking lighting at the time, but not paid. I do remember actually personally feeling like it was a long, dark winter last year. And I've got really aware of it because it was affecting my mood, to be fair. I'm quite responsive to that kind of stuff.
What do you cheer up in the summer then?
Ouch. Ouch. Yeah. You've got me now. Bastard. Yeah, Benny, that's it, retracting. And they really weren't looking great. So I'm like, okay, is it just because I've took them off a colour food as well? Is it just something there? Blah, blah, blah. So let that go on. It recovered again as the summer growth started. Sure enough, this year it's happened again. And at the same time, I've had a new batch of Tosai come in from NND, Tosai Kohaku. I think a lot of you guys might have seen the video on my Koi Wholesale channel. I actually selected them fish in the mud pond, starting back in September, did a deal. In October, I selected them. They were harvested and prepared. They never actually touched a pond at NND. They were prepared from harvest for shipping straight away, where it all synced up. So they've come out of a mud pond being very light in colour anyway, being very young as well, and having grown a lot, so everything's stretched quite a bit. The pigment really needed lifting. So I put them in my usual environment where they've come in, got them, quarantine settled, and then straight on with the growing. 24, 25 degrees, the intense feeding. I mean, my God, they've been growing, but the Benny, I've been watching it like almost, and I know not to doubt myself, but it's got me questioning like, shit, I think it's going to fall apart on a few. And with that happening, it's happened with the Dainichi fish again, a couple of other ponds, some Kaze shows we've been doing as a grow out, who's been growing intensively. It's all happened. This Benny's gone ultra soft looking, despite the use of colour food still. And it can only be one thing, it's UV. The levels of UV that's actually in, the UV index in the UK during this winter period has just been so poor. And if you actually look at it, daylight hours are shockingly, narrow, aren't they? That window, and even then, the UV index we've got must be so low, and it's really had an impact. And these are the ponds that people seen the colour of my fish in summer after raising all the rest of it. It's a prime environment where, I use techniques such as leaving the water to discolour a little bit to help prevent too much coming in and overdoing it. But in this case, there's been nowhere near enough. Now, when you put that into the context of hobbyists out there, keeping fish indoors or building fancy fish houses where a lot of UV, even if you've got side windows, it's not going to be enough anywhere near. My ponds have got a full clear visqueen sheet. No UV is lost through that process. Polycarbonate roofs emit up to 85% UV, I think it is. Some can be more. All these things in the mix, there's a lot of things affecting that colour development. And to achieve that colour you see when I pull one of them fish up after that period of growth and development in the summer, this is something that's got to be right. And out there at the minute, I don't really think we keep seeing solutions coming to the fore. Are they great? I don't think they are. And yeah, sure enough, the man we would all look to for certainly my guiding force for inspiration, Narita's got these light units that's been developed in Japan, and they're used for plant growing. So the spectrum is very closely aligned with what we're looking for. They're LED based, which is amazing. The wattage of them is phenomenal, just like all LED lights. Because some other options out there, the running cost would just be insane, really high wattage stuff. So yeah, exciting. We're just working on getting some of them over. There's a couple of test ponds, one at my place, and then a couple of clients that I know of where we're going to run them. Because one, again, huge pond that's got windows in one side. It's got the sheeting. I don't know what material it is, like on an industrial unit, the clear panels that go in. They're not letting it through because even though there's this natural light in there, I think it's, light and UV and everything is completely different things. The light's in there, but they're not getting that UV through or enough of it and enough strength to actually give the cells the energy to develop, because despite all this light, the colour's still retracting. And that's the important bit. So if this all works, these are going to be a phenomenal solution to koi keepers everywhere. And they've been tested by the man himself. And although he's not a man of many words, it's kind of like, what do you think? He says, after 2 months, great. Yeah, I don't need to know anymore, And these, I think he's used them in a room where he's raising. It's a building inside one of his fish houses. So again, there's probably just layers of little bit being lost, and where he raises Chibinisai. So colour's really, really important with them. So let's see. But this, I believe, is a huge problem out there in general. I think everybody wants to achieve that level of pigmentation in the fish. It's just getting there. And it's not easy to get there. And as I say, you're at a real tussle as a hobbyist between aesthetics and practicality. And like I say, these fancy roofs you might build over your pond look lovely. I'm not doubting that. But there are big hindrances when it comes to developing the colour of your koi.
Interesting stuff, mate. So, watch this space on that one, I guess.
Absolutely.
So, thanks for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the first session back in the podcast studio. First of many, no doubt. And, if you've got any questions or if you want to follow us on social media or anything like that, or drop us an email, feel free to do so. So, until the next one, I'll see you later, Ricky.
Nice one. Cheers, guys.